Hey, U.S. history students, today we're moving into the 1920s, also known as the Roaring Twenties, and I want you to remember these three things as we go throughout the 1920s. The 1920s is characterized by peace, prosperity, and changing values, or cultural conflict. As we look at the 1920 electoral map, you'll notice that Harding wins a big majority of the electoral votes. So America is ready for a change. They're ready to let the Republicans have a hand at government and see what they can do. And you can notice the North, West, and Northeast are all in Republican camp. The South is still very much in the hands of the Democrats. So now Harding is now the president. We're out of World War I. We're finally in a place of peace. And it's time to adjust to that peace. And Americans in the 1920s, they turn isolationists. They want to turn inward. They want to focus on the United States, focus on our economy, deal with issues that we have here at home. And so I want you to take a look at Warren G. Harding's inaugural address. And it's talking about isolationism, and it kind of gives you that sense that he wants to kind of turn inward and focus on the United States. An issue that the United States faces in the 1920s is known as the Red Scare. So World War I ends, but there's still fear. There's fear among citizens of the United States of communism, of socialism, of anarchy. We don't like immigrants. We're afraid that they're going to try to come in and overthrow our government. A lot of this fear stems from Russia. Russia, their government was overthrown and turned communist in 1919. And so this set off a panic in the U.S., and we call this the Red Scare. So red being a term for communism. And so people in the United States are fearful of communism. Because of this fear of communists, of anarchists, of immigrants, the United States has something called the Palmer Raids occur. Now the Palmer Raids all start when there was an Italian anarchist that did set off a bomb outside the Attorney General's house. His name was Mitchell Palmer. And basically, this was just one part of a bunch of attacks. So politicians were being attacked, judges, law enforcement officials in a bunch of different cities around the country. And so the United States, where the people are fearful, they want action to be taken. They want to have these anarchists, these immigrants rounded up and put in prison so that they will stop bombing different government officials. And so Mitchell Palmer, the Attorney General, he's convinced that there's a plot to overthrow the government by these anarchists. And so he basically orders this huge roundup of all these suspects. They round up over 4,000 people. They don't have warrants. They hold them in jail for months without charging them. And so a lot of civil liberties are bypassed, and these immigrants are kind of unjustly rounded up. And most of these immigrants were released. But 600 of them were deported. They were found to be guilty in some way of something and were deported. But this whole event is called the Palmer Raids. Another event that happened during the 1920s is known as the Sacco and Vanzetti case. And Sacco and Vanzetti, they're immigrants. They're Italian immigrants. They were anarchists. And a robbery and murder occurred. And these two guys were arrested for the crime, and they were put on trial. And now in trial, most people would say that there wasn't enough evidence to convict these guys. But the jury did convict them of the crime, and they were executed because many believed that it was because they were immigrants, because they were anarchists. There was this fear of immigrants. There was this fear of people trying to overthrow the government. And so this jury found these people guilty. And it's just another way that historians show that there's this huge fear out there of communism, of immigrants, of foreigners, and it led to the conviction of Sacco and Vanzetti. All of these events, the Red Scare, the anarchist bombing, Sacco and Vanzetti trial, all of these are stemming from a rise in nativism in the 1920s. So there's this dislike of foreigners, this belief they're inferior, this belief that they're going to somehow ruin the country, take over the country. And these nativists believe that the white Protestant Americans were superior to all others, to foreigners, to immigrants, and all these different groups. And so out of this rises a group called the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan. They find new life. They're kind of reborn. You see them again in the 1920s decade. And now they're hostile to not only African Americans, but they're hostile towards immigrants, to Catholics, to Jews, basically anyone that is different than they are. All right, moving to politics. During the 1920s, we're going to see the politics of the 1920s dominated by the Republican Party. We've got 3 Republican presidents that continue on through the 1920s. They take the White House from Woodrow Wilson in 1920, and they will hold it all through the 1920s. In the 1920s, there was a lot of prosperity. Remember, that's one of the first things, at least that I said, is prosperity in the 1920s. But they also saw the arrival of the Great Depression at the end of the decade. Now, the big thing you got to know about these 3 Republican presidents is they favored big business. So they're going to put policies in place that are going to help big businesses. They want to be laissez-faire, hands-off, minimal government interference. They want to let the market do what the market's going to do. They want to help big businesses, and they want to get the economy booming. That's the goal. Is if the economy's good, we're good. All right, some major themes that we're going to see throughout the 1920s that all of these Republican presidents did. We've got Harding, we've got Coolidge, we've got Hoover. These 3 presidents, they're going to pass high protective tariffs. We're going to tax foreign products coming in so that we can shelter our American businesses. Remember, we want to make our businesses boom. We want to help out American businesses, so they're going to pass high tariffs. They're going to lower taxes. So lower taxes on the wealthy and corporations. So high tariffs, low taxes. We want these businesses to be able to make as much money as they can, and we don't want to strangle them with having to pay the government a lot of taxes. And then less law enforcement of antitrust laws, which are monopoly laws, and less regulations. So they're going to be more lax. They're going to let businesses do more of what businesses want to do, and they're not going to get involved. So the Republicans are not going to get involved. High tariffs, low taxes, less enforcement, less regulation. So the first president, the Harding administration, President Harding, he wins 1920 by a landslide. His big slogan is a return to normalcy. A return to normalcy. We got to remember that slogan. He says, hey, we're going to turn back inward. We're going to focus on ourselves. We're going to go back to the good old days before we were involved in all these major world wars and different foreign entanglements. So, less ambitious foreign policy. We're not going to get involved overseas. We're going to focus on our production and prosperity at home. So, we don't join the League of Nations, Woodrow Wilson's main thing. So, we turn away from the rest of the world. We enact higher tariffs. We protect our own businesses. We lower taxes. We restrict immigration. So, we're turning in. We're focusing on us. We don't want to worry about the outside world. That's the Harding administration's major things. All right, Harding's weaknesses. Now, Harding, he's come to be known in American history as having a corrupt administration. And it really stemmed from he had the wrong people around him. He was kind of like a good old boy, wanted to put his friends into power, help him out. And so he appointed personal friends to his cabinet, to high positions in the government. And this group is known as the Ohio Gang. He's from Ohio. Not all of these people are from Ohio, but it's called the Ohio Gang. And a lot of them were dishonest and stole money and were corrupt. And this really brought his administration down. The biggest scandal, you got to remember, Teapot Dome scandal. Okay, so Harding, his Secretary of the Interior, the guy that's in charge of all the lands in the country, he takes these government-owned lands that have lots of oil in a place called Teapot Dome, Wyoming, and basically let some of his business friends go and take that oil, start drilling for that oil in exchange for personal bribes. So the Secretary of the Interior takes a bribe. All right, guys, you can go and drill for that oil. That's government-owned oil on government-owned land. So that wasn't uncovered until after Harding died, and it's one of the worst scandals in U.S. history. So not only that, but on top of that, the Director of Veterans Affairs, as they were building new hospitals for veterans coming back from World War I, he stole millions of dollars from these hospital building projects. So Harding's administration, known as corrupt, has a lasting stain on his presidency. President Coolidge, you need to know, he became president when Harding died. Harding died in office, and then Coolidge was reelected. So he's kind of old-fashioned, honest, pro-business. He didn't speak very much. He was known as Silent Cal, and he really had the laissez-faire approach to the economy. So he had that hands-off approach, same as the other Republican presidents: big business, high tariffs, low taxes, low regulations. Hoover comes into power, 1929. Big believer in rugged individualism, believer in people doing things for their own, less government interference. Just like the other Republican presidents of the decade. High tariffs, low taxes, low or very little regulation on business. All right, we're going to take a look at some of the factors that kind of caused the prosperity of the 1920s. First factor is going to be the automobile. Automobile starts to really rise in the 1920s. You've got Henry Ford, who's creating an affordable Model T. This is the first car that many Americans could afford, and he really does this because of the assembly line. Now, you got to know, Henry Ford, known for the assembly line, which helped him increase production, lower the cost. He's able to pump out lots of cars and make them affordable for Americans. So here's the assembly line. So he made affordable automobiles because of his assembly line. Each worker just does one small part. So you don't have one person making a whole car. You have one person putting in windshields, one person putting in the tires and whatever else. And so you just get good at your job, and you're able to be more efficient. You're able to be faster, and you can do your task, and you can pump out lots of cars very quickly. This is what Ford is known for. All right, we got Glenn Curtiss. You got to know Glenn Curtiss. He's an early aviation pioneer, helped develop the seaplane, and really got the Navy involved in using aircraft. And so in 1919, he actually constructed the first airplane that crossed the Atlantic Ocean. So Glenn Curtiss, aviation pioneer. Aviation is starting to take off in the 1920s. Okay, remember, 1920s, lots of prosperity, lots of money going around. People are living like there's no tomorrow. They're buying a bunch of stuff. More money is being spent on leisure items. And so advertising is really starting to pop up, and people are targeting these people to get them to spend their money on certain products. You also have retailers developing this thing called buying on credit. So basically, you put a small amount down. You put $10 down and pay $10 a month. You hear this on commercials all the time now. We still do it. Basically, it's like a credit card, or you buy something without paying for it all right now, and you pay for it as you go. So it allowed customers to buy more expensive goods than they normally could have, because you don't have to have all the money now. You just have to have part of the money now, and you just make payments every month as you go until it's paid for. Okay, so here's a little look at the advertising. So advertising really springs up in the 20s. Americans have money. They're wanting to spend it. Companies want them to spend the money on their products. And so they're advertising. They're trying to convince Americans that they need new products. And leisure products are really on the rise in the 1920s. But you got to remember, even though there's a lot of prosperity in the 1920s, it's not even. It's uneven. There's a lot of groups that were left out of the prosperity in the 1920s. 3/4 of Americans had no savings at all. Farmers were having problems, because same reason farmers have been having problems since the Gilded Age. More technology means they produce too much, the prices drop, and they're not making enough money on their farms. Railroads are suffering. You've got cars on the rise. So because cars are on the rise, cars are making money, railroads are losing money. And then factories are facing foreign competition. Other countries around the world are industrializing. They're pumping out lots of products, and Americans are buying foreign products. And so American factories, American businesses are losing out to some of that foreign competition. And then lastly, minority groups are having uneven prosperity because they're being discriminated against in the workplace. They can't get the jobs. And so minorities are not having the prosperity that a lot of Americans are having in the 1920s.